She said, "It hurts too much, not as a complaint, but as a confession, like she had finally reached the edge of what a human heart and body could endure." Her voice was thin, almost lost beneath the moaning wind that swept across the empty stretch of prairie. The cowboy stopped so suddenly his horse reared, hooves slicing the dirt. For a long second he just stared, seeing the shape on the ground by the broken wagon wheel. Then he swung down, boots hitting earth, and knelt beside her as if the world had narrowed to just this moment. He leaned close so she could hear him over the wind and whispered, "That's why I'm here." Her name was Sarah Whitmore, though pain had stripped her of names, memories, and even time. She only knew that every breath burned and every movement sent fire screaming through her body. Her left leg lay twisted, pinned beneath the splintered remains of a wagon axle. Blood had soaked into the dirt beneath her, dark and sticky. She had stopped crying hours ago. Tears took strength, and she had none left. She had been traveling west with her husband, chasing a promise that had already begun to feel like a lie. Land, opportunity, a better life. Those were the words he'd used. But the trail had been cruel, and the fever crueler. He had died 2 days before the accident, buried beneath a simple wooden cross she'd carved herself with shaking hands. She hadn't even finished grieving when the wagon overturned on a rocky slope, throwing her down and trapping her there. Alone, widowed, broken, waiting for death or something worse. When she saw the cowboy riding toward her earlier, hope and fear had tangled so tightly she couldn't tell them apart. She tried to call out but screamed instead when she shifted her leg. That was when the words spilled from her. "It hurts too much." Like admitting defeat. The cowboy didn't rush her. He removed his hat and placed it on the ground, a quiet gesture of respect. His hair was dark, touched with gray, his face weathered but kind. "I won't move you yet," he said calmly. "I just need to see where you're hurt." She watched him with wide, wary eyes, her fingers clawing into the dirt. She had nothing left to lose, but fear didn't care about logic. When his hand hovered near her leg, she flinched violently, a broken sob tearing out of her. He stopped instantly. "I know," he said softly. "I know it does." Something in his voice, steady, unafraid, patient, made her breathing slow just a little. He explained everything before he did it, every touch, every movement. He worked carefully, freeing her leg inch by inch, binding it with strips torn from his own shirt. When he finally lifted her, she screamed into his shoulder, tears soaking through his coat. He didn't tell her to be quiet. He didn't tell her to be brave. He just held her tighter and took the pain with her. His name was Thomas Hale. He lived alone on a small ranch miles from town, a man shaped by loss and long silences. He had buried a child once, a little boy who never made it past 5 winters. After that, his marriage had withered into quiet resignation before ending altogether. Since then, he'd learned to keep his heart guarded, his life simple. Until the day he found Sarah bleeding beneath the open sky. The ride to his ranch took hours. He chose the gentlest path, stopping whenever her pain surged too high. Each time she apologized through clenched teeth, and each time he answered the same way. "You don't owe me anything." By the time they reached his cabin, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Thomas cared for her with the same steadiness he brought to breaking horses and mending fences. He set her leg as best he could, splinted it, kept her fever down with cool cloths and whispered reassurances. There were moments when he thought he might lose her. When her skin burned and her breathing turned shallow, he sat beside her bed all night, speaking softly about nothing and everything, just to keep her tethered to the world. Sarah woke days later to the sound of rain on the roof and the smell of coffee. Pain still lived in her body, but it no longer consumed her whole being. She cried when she realized she was alive. Thomas sat nearby, not intruding, not leaving. Just there. Recovery was slow and unforgiving. Pain became a constant companion, sometimes dull, sometimes sharp enough to steal her breath. Grief hit harder than any physical wound. She dreamed of her husband's face, of promises whispered under starlight that would never be kept. Some days she lashed out, angry at the world, at herself, even at Thomas for saving her when she hadn't asked to be saved. He took it all without complaint. When she cried, he listened. When she pushed him away, he gave her space but never left. At night, when nightmares woke her screaming, he sat at the foot of the bed and reminded her where she was until the shaking stopped. Word spread, as it always did. Some people brought food. Others brought judgment disguised as concern. A lone woman living with a man not her husband was enough to stir gossip. Sarah heard the whispers and felt shame crawl into her chest. She told Thomas she would leave as soon as she could walk. "You'll leave when you're healed," he said. Not a day before. Trouble arrived wearing a smile and riding a fast horse. A man named Vernon Pike claimed Sarah's husband owed him money. He said debts didn't die with men. He said Sarah belonged to him now. The words turned her blood to ice. Thomas stood between them, calm but unyielding. "You're not taking her," he said. Pike sneered. "You don't get to decide that. I already did." The confrontation could have turned violent, but Thomas rode straight to town and brought the sheriff back with him. Pike's claims crumbled under scrutiny. He left angry and humiliated, vowing revenge that never came. Sarah wept that night, guilt crushing her chest. "I bring nothing but trouble," she said. "You should have left me on that trail." Thomas knelt beside her, eyes fierce with a quiet conviction. "No," he said. "I should have found you sooner." Weeks passed. Sarah learned to walk again, first with crutches, then with Thomas's arm steadying her. Each step hurt, but each step was also a victory. She began helping around the ranch, cooking, mending, finding purpose again. Laughter returned in small, fragile pieces. And somewhere along the way, without either of them noticing when it began, something deeper took root. Not rushed, not demanded, just grown from shared pain and shared survival. One night, Sarah stood on the porch, staring at the stars. "It still hurts," she said quietly. Thomas joined her. "I know. But it doesn't hurt the same way," she added. "It doesn't own me anymore." He smiled then, a rare, soft thing. "That's healing." Spring came gently, turning the land green again. Sarah's leg healed crooked but strong, a reminder of where she'd been and what she'd survived. When she finally spoke of leaving, of starting over somewhere else, Thomas listened without fear. "You don't owe me a life," he said. "But you're welcome to share one." Sarah looked at the man who had knelt beside her at her worst, who had carried her pain without trying to erase it. She thought of the trail, the words she'd spoken through tears. "It hurts too much." She took his hand. "I think," she said softly, "this is where I'm meant to be." The West remained harsh and unforgiving. Pain still found them. Loss still whispered. But they faced it together, knowing now that strength wasn't found in standing alone. And when life hurt too much, as it sometimes does, they remembered the truth that saved them both. Sometimes the greatest healing begins when someone stays, kneels beside you, and whispers, "That's why I'm here."